The first sound that disappeared was the clinking of silverware. For a second, it was as if time stuttered. A fork midair. A throat that didn't finish its laugh. Eyes darting between faces like someone had just thrown a glass of cold water across the table. And maybe, in a way, someone had. Because Derek, my son-in-law, had just stood up from his chair, slapped his palm on the table, and said the one thing I didn't expect to hear from a man whose house I helped save. "You have no respect in this house." He said it to me. In front of everyone. 8 people sat at that table, his friends, his co-workers, a few distant relatives from Emily's side. But for a moment, it felt like I was the only one there. I blinked. My fingers stayed wrapped around my fork, unmoving. The piece of grilled chicken on my plate had gone cold, untouched. I wasn't even sure what I had done to deserve that sentence. All I had done was ask if we could maybe turn the music down just a little. Not off. Not muted. Just lowered. The living room TV was blaring something loud, probably an action movie Derek was half watching while hosting his guests. His friends were laughing over it, tossing back beers like they were at a bar, not a family home on a Sunday afternoon. I said it as gently as I could. I even smiled when I said it. "Hey, Derek, do you mind turning the volume down a notch? I've got a bit of a headache." I expected a nod. Maybe a lazy hand on the remote. I didn't expect him to stand up, raise his voice, and throw a spotlight of embarrassment right at me. "This is my house," he added loudly, his eyes flashing around the room. "If you don't like how we do things here, maybe stay in your room." A few of the guests let out awkward coughs. One woman, maybe his coworker, shifted uncomfortably in her seat and looked at Emily. I did too. Emily. My daughter. My only child. She was sitting right there, beside him. She didn't even flinch. Her fingers were gently circling the rim of her wine glass. Her eyes remained focused on her lap. Not on me. Not on him. Just, still. She didn't speak. She didn't stop him. She didn't defend me. That silence was louder than anything Derek had said. I wanted to believe she hadn't heard him clearly. That maybe she was zoning out. That maybe, just maybe, she was waiting to talk to him later, in private, to make it right. But then I noticed her other hand. Resting lightly on Derek's thigh, as if to calm him down. As if I had done something wrong. I put the fork down gently, so gently it made no sound at all. I looked around the table. No one met my eyes. Suddenly, my face felt warm. My ears were ringing. I felt like I was back in the classroom again, 15 years ago, when I got falsely accused of losing a student's assignment. The same hot sting behind my eyes. The same knot in my throat. Only this time, there was no principal to correct things. No apology letter from a parent. No truth waiting to clear things up. Just shame. Deep, quiet shame. And that heavy silence. The kind where you start to feel the blood in your face because everyone else is looking somewhere else, anywhere else, but at you. Derek sat back down, smirking. Someone forced a laugh. Another guest cracked a joke to lighten the mood. And just like that, the room moved on. But I didn't. I stared at the table, trying to piece together how we got here. I didn't ask to live here. They asked me. Emily had cried when she called me 6 months ago. Derek's company was falling apart. They were behind on their mortgage. She was scared. Said they didn't want to lose the house. So I gave them everything I had left. My pension. My emergency fund. Even the certificate of deposit I was saving for medical bills. I signed the co-ownership papers because the bank required a second name. And I agreed to move in, just to make things easier. And now I was being told to stay in my room. I looked over at the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. A few leaves had blown in. The wind was shaking the old oak tree, the one I had trimmed last fall myself, with my own hands. I remembered Emily's smile back then. She had hugged me from behind while I raked the yard. "You saved us, Dad," she had whispered. "We'll never forget this." But today, she couldn't even lift her eyes to meet mine. Someone poured more wine. The music returned, louder now. Someone shouted, "Hey, Derek! Turn it up, this is the best part." I stood up quietly. No one noticed. I walked back to my room, closed the door behind me, and leaned against it. It's strange how a house can feel so full and so empty at the same time. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the small framed photo on my nightstand, me, Emily, and her mom. It was taken 10 years ago, before the cancer. Before the silence. I closed my eyes. Not because I was tired. But because I needed to disappear for a second. And as I sat there in that dark room, the voices outside echoing through the hallway, a small voice whispered inside me. "You're not a guest in this house. You bought this house. And they've forgotten that." I opened the drawer. The envelope was still there. The one from the bank. The one they didn't know I had. My name was on it. All it would take was one moment. One sentence. But not yet. Not tonight. Let them laugh a little longer. Let the music play. Because tomorrow, the silence will be theirs. The next morning, the house was quieter. Not silent, just tired. The kind of tired you feel after pretending everything was okay in front of people. The kind that settles in the floorboards and lingers in the coffee mugs. I heard footsteps around 7:30 a.m. The bathroom door creaked open. A cabinet closed. The shower turned on. They were awake. I waited, sitting on the edge of my bed, the morning light crawling slowly across the floor like a secret trying to reach me. I didn't want to go out there. But I had to. I couldn't let last night change my routine. If I did, it would mean he won. So I got up, shaved carefully, and made my way to the kitchen like I always did. Emily was there first. She was by the counter, pouring coffee into 2 mugs, one for herself, one for Derek. She didn't look up when I entered. I opened the fridge slowly, quietly took out the eggs, and went about preparing my usual scrambled breakfast. Still, nothing. No good morning. No apology. Not even a glance. And then, just before Derek entered, she finally spoke. "We have plans later, so we'll be out most of the afternoon." That was it. Just a logistical announcement. Not even addressed to me directly. More like a reminder left on a voicemail. "All right," I said softly. "Thanks for letting me know." She nodded once, barely. Then turned away. I wanted to believe she was embarrassed. That she was just trying to avoid an awkward confrontation. But deep down, I could feel it, she wasn't ashamed of what happened. She had simply moved on. Derek entered with his usual presence, wide chest, heavy footfalls, the scent of his cologne hitting the air like a warning sign. He kissed Emily's cheek and reached for the toast. I stepped aside, gave him room. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want to feel any smaller than I already did. We all sat at the table. Emily scrolled her phone. Derek chewed loudly and tapped out a voice note for someone on WhatsApp. Me? I ate silently, staring at the same spot on the wall I'd stared at the night before. That damn wall clock ticked so slowly it felt like it was mocking me. And then Derek broke the silence. "We might be late tonight. If you're making dinner, don't wait for us." I blinked. No mention of yesterday. No mention of what he said in front of everyone. No trace of regret. Just instructions. Like I was the help. "All right," I replied, keeping my voice flat. "You sure you're okay?" he asked suddenly, smiling. I paused. Was this his attempt at peace? "Yeah," I said carefully. "Why wouldn't I be?" His smile widened slightly. "You looked pretty rattled last night. Just making sure you didn't take it too personally." Emily didn't even lift her eyes. That was the moment I realized, he wasn't apologizing. He was making fun of me. He was rubbing it in. I stood up, pushed my chair back slowly, and carried my plate to the sink. I rinsed it. Dried it. Put it away. Then turned around and looked at both of them. "Have a good day," I said quietly. Neither of them answered. Back in my room, I sat down and took the envelope out of the drawer again. The house deed. My name. I hadn't shown it yet because part of me still wanted them to realize it on their own, to remember who helped them. To remember why they still had this roof over their heads. But now it felt like they were making a sport out of forgetting. And Emily. Her silence hurt more than Derek's insult. Because Derek was always blunt. He had always had that sharp edge under the surface. But Emily? She used to be warm. She used to call me every Sunday before she got married. She used to cry when she missed Mom. She used to beg me to visit more often. But now she couldn't even speak for me in her own home. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was disappointed. Deeply. Later that afternoon, I heard them getting ready to leave. Derek was laughing on the phone with someone, talking about some steakhouse they were meeting friends at. Emily was quiet, but not like she was sad. Just tuned out. Detached. They left around 3:15. I heard the front door close, and the car engine rumble away. And suddenly, the house was quiet again. Not just empty, quiet. For the first time in days, I could hear the wind outside, the hum of the fridge, the birds near the window. I walked through the hallway slowly, taking in the pictures on the walls. None of them included me. Every frame, vacations, holidays, even their wedding photos, had been rearranged recently. Some of the older ones, where I was in the background, were gone. Erased. As if I was being rewritten out of my own family. I ended up standing in the living room. The same room where Derek humiliated me. I looked down at the carpet where he stood yesterday. I could still feel the echo of his voice in my ears. "You have no respect in this house." And then I said something out loud, quietly, to the empty room. "But I gave you this house." It wasn't a dramatic line. It wasn't a threat. It was just the truth, spoken into silence, like a confession. And it was the first time I allowed myself to say it aloud. I sat on the couch and turned the TV on. The volume was still at full blast. I didn't turn it down. I let it play as loud as Derek liked it. And I sat there, staring at nothing. Because now, the silence wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to them. They just didn't know it yet. The house didn't always feel like this. It wasn't always cold. It wasn't always filled with footsteps that paused when I entered a room. There was a time, not that long ago, when this home was filled with light, when laughter spilled from the kitchen and my name was spoken with warmth. But that version of the house disappeared the moment I gave them what they needed. I still remember the exact day it all began, the moment they asked me for help. It was 6 months ago. I was sitting at my small kitchen table in my old apartment, sipping black tea and reading the newspaper. It was raining that morning, hard. The kind of rain that made the windows hum. My phone rang. It was Emily. She sounded small. Frantic. "Dad? Can we talk? It's kind of urgent." I told her to come over. She didn't even wait. She and Derek arrived 30 minutes later, soaked from the rain, both of them looking like they hadn't slept in days. They sat at my table, Derek not saying much at first. Emily did most of the talking. The house, this very house, was in trouble. Derek had made some bad business decisions, invested in some new company, and they were behind on mortgage payments. "We're 2 weeks away from defaulting, Dad," she said, eyes wide. "I'm scared we'll lose it." I looked at her, then at Derek. "You didn't tell me anything about this before," I said. "We thought we could fix it," Derek finally muttered. "But the numbers don't lie." Then Emily reached across the table, took my hand, and said something I'll never forget. "You're the only one who's ever saved me. One last time, Dad. Please." That moment, those words, burned into my memory. And like any father would, I said yes. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to protect the last part of her life I could still touch. So I went to the bank with them. We sat with the branch manager, Mr. Bell, who explained the situation. They were in default. The bank was days away from starting foreclosure. Derek didn't qualify for a refinance on his own. Emily had no job at the time. She'd quit hers 2 months earlier to help Derek with his business. Mr. Bell said they needed someone with stable income history or retirement funds to co-sign and partially secure the loan if we wanted to save the house. I didn't hesitate. I withdrew my emergency savings. Liquidated my small stock fund. Took the penalty to break my retirement CD early. And we signed the papers. Derek's name. Emily's name. And mine. I was now a legal co-owner of the house. The first few weeks were warm again. Emily brought me tea in the mornings. Derek would chat with me in the evenings about his work ideas. They even set up a little reading corner in the sunroom for me, with a new chair and a side table. It felt like family. It felt like I had a place. But the shift came slowly. Gradually. So soft you could almost miss it. It started with space. Derek asked if I could move my books from the hallway shelf just so the house doesn't look cluttered for guests. I agreed. Then it was the reading chair, replaced by a decorative plant. Then the thermostat, suddenly too warm in summer, too cold in winter. But every time I adjusted it, someone would change it back. Then Emily stopped knocking on my door. Then she stopped coming in at all. I told myself it was just stress. That they were busy. That once things settled, we'd have Sunday brunches again. But weeks turned into months. And I found myself talking more to the kettle than to the people in the house. One evening, Derek came home late. I was in the kitchen making soup. He walked in, tossed his keys on the counter, and said, "You know, you don't have to keep cooking dinner. We usually order out anyway." He didn't say it kindly. He said it like I was a house guest overstaying his welcome. I nodded, stirred the soup, and said nothing. I told myself I was imagining it. Until that one night, I overheard something. They didn't know I was awake. I had gotten up to get a glass of water and walked past their room. The door was slightly open. Emily was saying something about needing to find a better balance. And Derek responded, annoyed. "He's your dad, not a tenant. But he acts like he owns the place." Emily didn't reply. But her silence told me everything. That sentence, "he acts like he owns the place," it echoed in my head for days. Because the truth was, I did help save this house. Without me, there would be no balance. No mortgage. No roof. No peace. I hadn't asked for recognition. I hadn't asked for control. All I wanted was space. A little respect. But now, I felt like a visitor. And visitors eventually were out their welcome. I went back to the bank. Not to cause trouble. Just to check in. Mr. Bell greeted me kindly and pulled up the records. They had missed another payment. "They're close to default again," he told me. "It doesn't look good." I asked him what my options were. He said that as a co-signer and part owner, I had the legal right to take over the loan completely if I covered the missed payments and assumed full responsibility. "It would mean the house becomes yours," he said carefully. "Your name, your deed. You'd have the legal authority." I nodded. I didn't make the decision right away. I went home and sat on my bed for hours that night. Staring at the same framed photo of me, Emily, and her mother. A simpler time. A better time. I wasn't angry. Not yet. But I was, preparing. A few days later, I returned to the bank. Signed the forms. Made the payment. Mr. Bell slid the deed across the desk, now updated with just one name, Robert Whitaker. I brought the envelope home. Placed it gently in my drawer. didn't say a word. Not to Emily. Not to Derek. I waited. I needed to see, if they'd come back on their own. If they'd remember who I was. If they'd remember what I gave up for them. But the more I waited, the more invisible I became. They stopped saying goodnight. Stopped inviting me to dinner. Even the dog, who once slept in my room, wasn't allowed near me anymore. It was like I had been erased from the very walls I helped keep standing. And then came that Sunday lunch. When Derek stood up, raised his voice, and said those words in front of everyone. "You have no respect in this house." That was the moment everything inside me changed. He didn't know the papers were already signed. He didn't know that I owned the house now. And Emily, my daughter, didn't know how much her silence cost her. I didn't plan revenge. I planned something worse. Truth. Revealed at just the right time. In just the right room. To just the right people. Because this wasn't always my place. But now, it would never be theirs again. It was supposed to be a regular morning. But the thing about betrayal is, it rarely announces itself. Sometimes it shows up quietly, in the form of a white envelope lying sideways on a kitchen counter. I hadn't planned to be in the kitchen that early. But that night, I barely slept. Derek's voice from the day before still rang in my ears, loud, smug, and sharp. "You have no respect in this house." And Emily's silence? That was worse than anything he could have screamed. So I got up early. Needed fresh air. Needed routine. I brewed a fresh cup of tea, hoping the bitterness would ground me. That's when I saw it. A plain white envelope, no label or sticky note. Just sitting next to the fruit bowl like someone forgot it. I wouldn't have paid it much attention, but I recognized the logo printed faintly in the top left corner. West Ridge Bank. My hand paused midair. That bank. The same one we went to together 6 months ago. The same one where I gave up everything to save this house. I didn't touch it. At first, I stood still, staring at it like it might disappear on its own. But curiosity isn't always a choice. Sometimes it's survival. I moved slowly, gently turning the envelope to see if it had been opened. It hadn't. Still sealed. Still full of answers. I listened. The house was quiet. Emily and Derek were still asleep upstairs. The bathroom door hadn't opened yet. I had a few minutes. So I took it. Not out of spite. Not out of paranoia. Out of fear. Because when a house you help save starts feeling like a prison, every unopened envelope becomes a trap waiting to snap shut. I didn't open it in the kitchen. I took it to my room. Sat down on the edge of my bed. My fingers hesitated, not because I didn't want to see what was inside, but because some part of me already knew. I opened the flap carefully, slid out the paper, unfolded it slowly. And there it was. Notice of missed mortgage payment, final warning. 3 months behind. It was dated 5 days ago. I stared at it, numb. They hadn't told me. They hadn't asked for help. They hadn't even mentioned it. And it wasn't just the missed payment that shook me. It was the line near the bottom, small, easy to miss, but written in bold. Foreclosure proceedings may begin in 14 days unless full payment is received. 14 days. I felt something shift in me. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just clarity. Because now I understood everything. The tension. The way Derek had been walking around like the king of a crumbling castle. The way Emily kept avoiding eye contact. The cold dinners. The loud music. The sharp comments. They weren't just losing respect. They were losing the house. And they were trying to pretend like it wasn't happening. But why hadn't they told me? Why didn't Emily call me the way she used to? Why hadn't Derek, arrogant as he was, at least asked for my support again? The answer came to me before I even had to say it out loud. Because they already took everything I had. They thought there was nothing left to give. They thought I was empty now. Just a guest. Just a burden. But what they didn't know was that I never stopped watching. I never stopped listening. And I never stopped caring, even after they stopped deserving it. I put the letter back in the envelope, sealed it shut, and placed it inside my drawer. And for the first time since I moved into this house, I started making my own plan. Later that day, I went back to the bank. I walked in with steady steps. Mr. Bell was behind the glass doors, typing something. He looked up, surprised to see me. "Mr. Whitaker," he greeted. "Everything all right?" I handed him the letter. He read it. His eyes flicked to the top corner, recognizing the account. He looked up again, more carefully this time. "How much is it?" I asked. He told me. It was a large amount. Not impossible, but heavy. Heavy enough to crush someone without savings. Then he asked me something no one else had asked in months. "Are you okay, sir?" I looked at him. "I will be. Once the house is safe." Mr. Bell pulled out some papers. Explained how, as co-signer and partial legal owner, I could assume full responsibility. If I paid off the overdue amount, plus an advance on the next 2 months, the bank would remove their names and transfer full title to me. It would take a few days. I asked him for a clean printed deed, updated with my name only. He nodded. And I signed. I walked out of that bank with 2 things, an official receipt, and an envelope. Inside it? Power. Not revenge. Not yet. Just quiet, legal truth. When I got back home, Derek's car was gone. Emily was in the backyard, watering plants she barely remembered to care for anymore. I passed her quietly. She didn't say anything. She didn't know I had just saved the very roof over her head, again. That night, I sat on the bed and held the envelope in my hands. I didn't open it again. I didn't need to. I knew what was written inside. And I knew that someday soon, when the moment was right, I'd place it on the table and let them read it for themselves. Because sometimes, silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the sharpest blade of all. But not yet. Not tomorrow. Not until I was ready. Not until they were. Because I wanted to see how far they'd go. How much farther they'd push. How much more they'd take. Before the truth finally came down like thunder. The next morning, I returned to the bank. The sky was dull and overcast, the kind of gray that matched the ache in my chest. I wore my old tan coat, the one Emily gave me for my birthday 5 years ago. Funny how even clothes remember better days. I stepped into the bank just before 9 a.m. and walked straight to the glass office at the back. The woman at the front desk smiled and motioned for me to go in. Mr. Bell was behind his desk, already working. He looked up and paused, eyes softening, like he remembered the man who had sat in that chair months ago, desperate to save his daughter's house. "Mr. Whitaker," he said, rising slightly. "Please, come in." I nodded and sat down. He didn't speak right away. He looked at me. I looked back. And something unspoken passed between us, something that made me wonder if he had seen this story 100 times before. Fathers. Daughters. Money. Silence. He opened the folder on his desk. Inside were 3 sheets of paper. Clean. Final. Binding. He pushed them forward gently. "This is the final ownership transfer," he said. "Once you sign, the house becomes legally yours. Only yours." I took a slow breath. Not because I was nervous. Because I wanted to remember this moment. "And they'll be notified?" I asked. "They'll receive standard mail notification in 10 days, he said. "Unless you choose to inform them directly." "I'll tell them myself," I said. "But not yet." He nodded, like he expected that answer. Then he leaned back in his chair and looked at me differently. Not like a client. Like a man. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly. Of course. Why are you doing this way? Secretly. Silently. Why not tell them now and walk away with the power? I looked at him. And then I smiled, not out of pride, but something else. Something older. Because they already told me who they are, I said. Now I'm just waiting to see if they regret it. Mr. Bell didn't respond immediately. He looked down at the papers and tapped the edge of the pen against the desk. Then he said something I didn't expect. My father did something like this once. I raised an eyebrow. He continued. I was young. Too proud. Thought I didn't need him. He helped me buy my first apartment. I stopped answering his calls. When he passed, I found out he'd left the deed to me, but also a letter. It said, respect is the only currency that never loses value. He looked up. What you're doing? It's not just about ownership. It's about respect, isn't it? I nodded. It always has been. I signed. One by one. Initials. Signature. Date. Each pen stroke felt like a quiet heartbeat, steady, strong, irreversible. When I finished, Mr. Bell took the papers, pressed them neatly into a new folder, and sealed it. Then he reached into the top drawer of his desk and pulled out a single white envelope, thicker than the others. He slid it toward me. Your copy. It's official now. You're the sole owner. I didn't open it. I just placed it carefully in the inside pocket of my coat. I stood. Thank you, I said quietly. No, he replied. Thank you for reminding me that silence can speak louder than pride. The walk home felt different. Heavier. Not because of the folder in my pocket. But because of what it meant. I own the house now. The one they said I didn't belong in. The one they said wasn't mine. The same house where I was told to stay quiet, stay small, stay out of the way. And still, I felt no joy. No satisfaction. Just a stillness. Like standing in the eye of a storm and waiting for the next gust. When I got home, Emily and Derek were still out. Their car was gone. The hallway was quiet. I placed the envelope inside the drawer of my nightstand. On top of the older one, the foreclosure notice I had found just days ago. 2 envelopes. 1 promise. 1 betrayal. That evening, I sat at the dinner table alone. I made tea. Not for them. Just for myself. As I stirred the sugar, I thought about all the conversations we could have had. How easy it would have been for Emily to come to me and say, Dad, we're in trouble again. Can you help? I would have helped. Again. Gladly. Even after everything. Because that's what fathers do. But she didn't. She chose silence. The same silence she gave me at the lunch table when Derek humiliated me in front of strangers. The same silence she gave me every time I entered the room and her eyes slid away like I was an echo of something she was trying to forget. And Derek? He didn't even try. He had buried his pride so deep into his chest that even desperation couldn't dig it out. To him, I wasn't a person. I was a utility. A credit line with a name. But now they were living in my house. Sleeping under my roof. Drinking coffee in my kitchen. Not knowing that every breath they took was already resting on borrowed ground. And the more I thought about it, the less I felt the need for revenge. Because it wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. And clarity is colder than anger. Quieter. But far more permanent. That night, I sat outside on the back porch. The sun was low, bleeding into the sky like it was exhausted from burning all day. I watched the light stretch across the yard, the same yard I had mowed for them. The same one I trimmed hedges for when Derek couldn't be bothered to lift a rake. Emily came home around 8. I heard the car door, the jingling of her keys, the lock turning in the front door. She didn't notice me sitting out back. I didn't call out. I didn't want her to know I was there. I wanted to see if she'd come looking for me. She didn't. Later that night, I heard laughter from the living room. The same kind of easy laughter that dripped with ignorance, the kind that forgets who paid the electricity, who kept the roof from collapsing. And as they watched their show, feet on the table, drinks in hand, I pulled the envelope out of the drawer. Held it. Looked at the name printed across the top. Robert Whitaker, sole property owner. And I whispered to myself, not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of truth. You say I don't have respect in this house. But this house doesn't even belong to you. I kept the envelope in my drawer. Untouched. Undisturbed. Like a loaded weapon I wasn't quite ready to fire. I told myself I was waiting for the right time. But the truth was simpler, I wanted to give them one last chance. I wanted to be wrong about them. Every day after I signed the deed, I watched Emily and Derek closely. I watched the way they moved through the house as if they owned every square inch. I watched how they ignored the creaking hallway near the guest room, my room, like they didn't even realize someone lived there. I watched how Emily stopped knocking when she needed something, she just barged in and said, "Dad, can you fix the Wi-Fi? Dad, have you seen the charger? Dad, don't forget to stay in your room on Thursday, we're having guests over." No please. No thank you. No how are you? Derek, meanwhile, spoke to me like I was a background character in his story. Can you not leave the bathroom light on again? Don't touch the thermostat, it messes with the system. Also, if you use the laundry on Sundays, just don't leave stuff in the machine. It delays our cycle. I wanted to ask. Do you know who paid for this thermostat? Do you know who saved this house twice while you were busy losing money on whatever business scheme came and went? But I stayed silent. Not because I was weak. Because I was watching. Waiting. Giving them a test. And they didn't even know it. One night, about a week after the paperwork was finalized, I decided to test them directly. A small, quiet test. It was nearly 9 p.m. The three of us were in the living room. Derek was on the recliner, Emily curled up next to him on the couch. I sat at the edge of the other chair, pretending to read a newspaper I had already read 3 times. On the coffee table sat a glass of water. Mine. I reached out, picked it up, took a sip, and then gently asked, "Would it be all right if I invited an old friend over next weekend? Just for tea. He hasn't seen me since I moved in." Derek didn't look up. "Tea where?" "Here," I said. "In the backyard. Just for an hour or so. Quiet." He finally looked over. Raised an eyebrow. "Why would you bring people here? This isn't a community center." I blinked. Emily said nothing. I turned to her. She was staring at the TV. "Emily?" I asked gently. "Would it bother you?" She sighed. Not loudly. Not rudely. Just the sigh of someone who didn't want to deal with it. "Honestly, Dad, we've been really busy. Maybe not this week." There it was. No discussion. No warmth. Just quiet dismissal. That night, I sat on my bed and looked around the room that was supposedly mine. The same room that used to smell like fresh linen and clean wood. Now, it smelled like resentment. Faint. Lingering. I opened the drawer and took out the envelope again. Ran my fingers along the edges. The weight of it was the same as before. But my heart? That had changed. Because now, I wasn't waiting for the right moment. Now, I was waiting for the last thread of hope to snap. But the truth? The ugliest truth? Was that a part of me still hoped. Still believed Emily would knock one night with tears in her eyes and say, "Dad, I'm sorry. I don't know why I've been acting this way. I miss you." Still believed Derek would realize what kind of man he had become and apologize, not with words, but with actions. Still believed there was love in this house. Buried under the layers of ego and excuses. A few days later, another small test. I baked. Not because I had to, but because Emily used to love my cinnamon rolls when she was a child. I spent 2 hours in the kitchen. The smell filled the house. It was warm. Familiar. When they came home, I had just finished setting the tray on the counter. Emily passed by and paused for a moment. "What's that?" she asked flatly. "Cinnamon rolls," I smiled. "The ones you used to like." She looked at them, then at me. "I'm off sugar this month," she said. "But thanks." She walked away. Derek came in 10 minutes later. He grabbed one. Took a bite. "You went heavy on the sugar," he mumbled with his mouth full. "And that was that." "No thank you. No, it smells amazing in here." No memory of the man who used to make these every Sunday after church while his little girl danced around the kitchen. That night, I didn't cry. But something inside me closed. Like a door. Like a chapter. Like the last inch of hope sealing shut. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror. Looked into my own eyes for the first time in what felt like weeks. And I said, quietly, "You were wrong. Not about them. About me. I was wrong for hoping they'd see me again. I was wrong for thinking love was enough to keep someone human. I was wrong to stay silent this long." That afternoon, Derek and Emily left to run errands. I waited until the sound of the engine faded completely. Then I walked to the kitchen. Cleared the counter. Wiped the table. And placed the envelope right in the center, perfectly straight, facing the living room. No note. No dramatic setup. Just truth, waiting like a still predator. I sat on the back porch, drinking tea. The sun was bright, but the wind had teeth. The leaves whispered something only I could hear. "It's time." When they came home, I didn't move. I listened through the window. Heard the door open. Heard Emily laugh at something Derek said. Then the silence. Sharp. Sudden. Like a gasp held in someone's throat. I didn't go inside. Not yet. Let them read it. Let them feel what I felt. Let them sit in that chair and realize the house they thought was theirs had never truly belonged to them. But still, deep down, under the layer of pride, under the ice, I hoped Emily would come outside. Not to yell. Not to argue. Just to speak. Just to say, "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" But no one came. Not that evening. Not the next morning. Not even after the truth had been placed gently, silently, in the heart of their home. That was when I knew. The silence wasn't just theirs now. It belonged to all of us. And it was about to become deafening. Sunday came like it always did, slow and sticky. But this one felt different. Because this was the first Sunday after I left the envelope on the table, and they said nothing. Not a word. Not even a mention. They had seen it, I was sure of it. There's no way they missed it. It was placed dead center on the dining table, where they ate every day, right under the light fixture. I imagined the moment they read it. I imagined Derek's smirk fading. Emily's breath catching in her throat. But no one said a thing. Not to me. Not even to each other. And now here we were. Preparing lunch for guests. Because somehow, after everything, they still had the audacity to host a Sunday gathering, as if their world hadn't quietly tilted under them. By noon, the kitchen smelled like lemon chicken and garlic bread. Derek had invited a few of his co-workers. Emily had called 2 of her cousins. Everyone was bringing something. Emily was bustling around the kitchen, ignoring me entirely except for brief instructions. "Can you hand me the salad bowl? Don't set the table yet, we're still waiting on the rice. Oh, and make sure the living room throw pillows are fluffed, Derek wants the space to look cozy." I did everything she asked, silently. Not because I felt like a servant. But because I was watching. Every small detail. Every fake laugh. Every flick of her wrist. Every step she took that avoided passing too close to me. She was pretending. Pretending everything was normal. By 1:30, the doorbell rang. One by one, the guests arrived. Laughter. Hugs. Coats were hung. Dishes placed on the counter. Jokes traded in the kitchen. Derek was in full host mode, loud, charming, confident. Like nothing was wrong. But I noticed the tightness in his jaw every time he looked at me. I noticed how he introduced me. "Oh, that's Emily's dad, he's staying with us for a while." Staying. As if I was a houseguest passing through. As if the walls I bought weren't holding up the roof above his head. We all sat down to eat at 2 o'clock sharp. 10 people. A long rectangular table. Derek at the head. Emily at his side. Me near the end, 1 seat away from the kitchen entrance. I didn't say much. Just passed the dishes. Smiled politely. Nodded at jokes I didn't find funny. It was a warm scene. But beneath that warmth was ice. Frozen tension that only I could feel. Halfway through the meal, one of Derek's coworkers, a young man with slicked back hair and too much confidence, leaned back and joked. "Derek, man, how'd you land a house like this in this market?" Laughter. Derek grinned. "It's called good timing and smarter decisions, my friend." More laughter. Emily smiled. Proud. No one looked at me. I said nothing. But I felt something twist deep in my chest. Not jealousy. Disgust. Because that wasn't just a lie, it was a theft. A theft of the truth. Then came the moment. So small. So seemingly unimportant. And yet it would change everything. I had just reached for the salt shaker. The TV was on in the living room, some action film playing in the background. The volume was louder than it needed to be, probably for Derek's sake. I leaned slightly toward him and asked gently, "Would you mind turning that down a bit?" Just hard to hear across the table. That's all I said. Calm. Polite. But Derek, for reasons only his pride could understand, put his fork down loudly, leaned back in his chair, and said with a laugh, "You're the only one complaining, Robert. Maybe it's time to get your ears checked." Some of the guests chuckled awkwardly. I offered a quiet smile, trying not to let it escalate. "Sorry, it's just a bit distracting." He scoffed. Then, in front of everyone, he dropped the mask. "Honestly, you've been acting like you run the place lately." Silence. Utter silence. I looked at Emily. She didn't speak. Didn't flinch. Didn't even frown. She kept cutting her chicken like nothing had happened. Then Derek added, "You have no respect in this house." And just like that, the room cracked. Forks stopped midair. Glasses froze in hands. The music from the TV suddenly felt like it was echoing inside a church. I looked around. 10 people. No one defended me. No one asked Derek to stop. Not even Emily. She just sat there. Still. Quiet. Ashamed, maybe. But not enough to speak. My eyes fell back to Derek. He was watching me now, waiting to see how I'd respond. He thought I'd shrink. He thought I'd get up and leave the table, humiliated. But I didn't. Instead, I picked up my fork again. Took a bite of food. Chewed slowly. And swallowed. Then I said, "You're right, Derek." He blinked, not expecting that. I continued. "I don't have any respect in this house." Then I leaned forward just slightly, voice low, calm, but deliberate. "But maybe, that's because you don't know whose house this really is." He frowned. Emily looked up. Just briefly. The tension at the table shifted, confused, uneasy. But I said nothing more. I let the words hang in the air like mist. Unclear. Heavy. Because this wasn't the time. Not yet. But the stage was set. The cracks had formed. And now all I had to do was wait. The guests left around 5 p.m. They trickled out slowly, one by one, their smiles tight and awkward after what had happened at the table. Some of them avoided eye contact with me entirely. A few mumbled polite goodbyes, unsure whether to offer sympathy or stay neutral. No one mentioned what Derek said. No one mentioned how I sat there, silent, after being told, again, that I had no respect in the very house I had saved, twice. Emily stood near the door as they left, offering air kisses and short laughs like nothing had happened. Derek? He was already on the couch with a beer in his hand, scrolling through his phone. I stayed in the kitchen, cleaning quietly. Not because I had to. Because it gave me time to think. To feel. To let the weight of that moment settle in. The plates clinked softly as I placed them in the dishwasher. The sponge moved in slow circles. My fingers wrinkled from the water, but I didn't stop. Because with every dish I cleaned, something inside me was sharpening. Not rage. Not vengeance. Readiness. There was one cup left. A small white teacup with a thin blue rim. Emily's favorite. The one she used to drink cocoa from when she was a child. The one she insisted I bring with me when I moved in. It reminds me of Mom, she had said back then. I want it here. Now it sat on the counter, dirty, stained with coffee she hadn't even finished. I picked it up gently, turned it in my hands. Ran my thumb along the edge. And in that small, quiet moment, I realized something. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about anger. It was about truth. And the truth deserved to be seen. Held. Felt. So I dried the teacup carefully, polished it with a towel, and set it in the center of the dining table. Then I walked to my room, opened the drawer, and took out the envelope. It was heavier than I remembered. Not physically, but in meaning. This envelope wasn't just a piece of paper anymore. It was a mirror. And I was about to hold it up to them. I returned to the table and placed the envelope beside the teacup. Right in the center. No note. No drama. Just the symbols of two different lives colliding, a father's quiet love, and the paper proof that love was no longer blind. Then I went outside to the porch and waited. The sun was beginning to lower, casting long shadows across the grass. I sipped my tea slowly, breathing in the air like it might steady the storm coming. Inside, I could hear faint movement. Emily's footsteps. The sound of a cupboard closing. And then, silence. For a few minutes. Then, "Robert," she called softly. I didn't answer. She stepped outside, shielding her eyes from the sun. "Did you leave this envelope out?" I turned slightly in my chair, met her eyes. Calm. "Yes." She hesitated. "It has your name on it. From the bank." "I know." "So it's the deed," I said quietly, cutting her off. "To this house." She blinked. Didn't speak for a moment. Her lips parted, but no sound came. "The full deed," I added. "In my name only. As of last week." Emily stepped back slightly. The silence between us now was no longer passive. It was stunned. "Why would you do that?" "Because I had to," I said. "Because the house was about to be foreclosed again. And no one told me." She looked down at the floorboards, her shoulders tightening. "We didn't want to worry you. You stopped speaking to me, Emily." "That's not true." "You stopped seeing me." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The quiet was doing all the work for me. Behind her, I saw Derek appear in the doorway. Beer still in hand. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone already defensive. Emily turned to him, the envelope now clutched in her hands. "He owns the house." Derek froze. "What?" "He owns it," she repeated. "Completely." He laughed once, dry, unsure. "That's not possible." I stood slowly, tea still in hand, and walked toward them. I was the cosigner. I covered the missed payments. I assumed full responsibility. The bank processed everything. It's legal. Derek's face darkened. You went behind our backs? I tilted my head slightly. No. You turned your backs. I just walked the path alone. Silence. The kind of silence that sits like a knife in the room, sharp, shimmering, unavoidable. Emily looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time in weeks. Why didn't you tell us? I took a breath. Because I wanted to see if you'd come to me like before. Like family. Like someone who cared. We were going to handle it, Derek muttered. You couldn't, I said. And you didn't. But even then, I didn't say anything. So what now? Derek snapped. You going to kick us out? Embarrass us? I looked him in the eyes. No. I'm not you. He flinched. Not visibly. Not dramatically. But I saw it. The flicker. The moment he realized the power had shifted, not with fists, not with yelling, but with quiet dignity. I turned back to Emily. This was never about owning a house. It was about being seen. Being respected. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry, Dad. And for the first time, it sounded like she meant it. But it was too late. Not for me to forgive. But for her to undo what had already been done. I left them standing there, under the porch light, beside the final teacup and the open envelope, and returned inside. I closed my bedroom door gently. No slam. No rage. Just closure. Because sometimes, the loudest thing a person can do is say nothing at all. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of anger. Not out of triumph. But because silence, the kind that follows truth, is heavier than most people realize. It was quiet in the house, but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that comes after a storm warning, when the air feels too still, and the walls seem to be holding their breath. Outside my bedroom door, I heard nothing. No arguing. No footsteps. Not even the usual hum of the TV in the living room. Just stillness. Dead, heavy stillness. And I knew, in that silence, Derek was unraveling. I sat in the armchair by the window, a book open on my lap, unread. I wasn't thinking about what I'd said. I was thinking about what I hadn't said. I never told them I was disappointed. I never told them how I used to sit in this very chair and imagine Sunday brunches and laughter in the kitchen. I never told them how I waited, for weeks, for a single knock on the door that never came. And now? Now the silence wasn't a wound. It was a weapon. And I hadn't even had to swing it. Around 1 a.m., I finally heard it. The muffled voice. Then another. Louder. Sharper. It was Derek and Emily. Arguing. I couldn't hear all the words, just tones. Accusation. Panic. Blame. I stood quietly, walked to the hallway, and leaned slightly near the door. Did you know about this? No, Derek, I found out the same time you did. You let him do this to us. He saved us. Again. And we didn't even say thank you. That one hit me. Harder than I expected. Because buried in that sentence was the truth I'd been waiting for, not from Derek, but from her. And even if she didn't say it to me, she finally said it out loud. I stepped back. Returned to my room. Closed the door. And this time, I did sleep. Not easily. But fully. As if something inside had finally let go. The next morning, the house felt different. Still quiet. Still tense. But something had shifted. The weight had moved. I walked into the kitchen around 7 a.m. Derek was there. Alone. Leaning against the counter. Staring at the stove like it had personally betrayed him. He didn't say anything as I entered. Didn't move. Didn't even glance up. I poured a glass of water, drank slowly. Then I spoke first. Coffee? No reply. I poured 2 cups anyway. Placed one near him. Kept the other for myself. Sat down at the table and waited. It took him nearly a full minute to speak. So what happens now? He muttered. What do you mean? He looked up, eyes tired, pride cracked. You gonna kick us out? I shook my head. No. He blinked. Why not? I took a sip of coffee, then met his eyes. Because I don't need to. You want to humiliate me? No, Derek. You did that to yourself. He didn't speak for a while after that. He just stood there, cup untouched. Then he suddenly slapped his palm on the counter. Not loudly, but with enough force to send a tremor through the air. You think you're better than me? No, I said. But I think I remember who helped who. His chest rose and fell, breathing heavier now. I built this life. I took risks. I worked my ass off to give Emily something real. And you lost everything. Twice. He stepped forward. 1 step. Not threatening. But unstable. You think you're the hero in all this? No, I said quietly. I'm just the one who didn't forget what love looks like. That hit him. Hard. He stood there for a moment. Then looked away. You've ruined everything. No, I replied. I just pulled the curtain back. Emily walked in then. Her hair messy. Her eyes swollen. She had been crying. She looked at both of us, unsure who to speak to first. Then she walked to the table and sat across from me. Can we talk? I nodded. Derek scoffed. Of course. Let's all sit and talk like some therapy group while our life falls apart. He walked out of the room, muttering. We let him go. Neither of us tried to stop him. Emily reached for her cup. Her fingers trembled slightly. I read the entire document, she said. Last night. After everything. I nodded. And? I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything, I said softly. But I want to. Then say it truthfully. She looked at me. Eyes red. Mouth trembling. I failed you. Silence. Then she whispered. I let him change the way I saw you. I let myself believe you'd always be there, no matter how I treated you. And I was, I said. Until I had to stop. A tear slipped down her cheek. I don't blame you. I didn't do it to hurt you, Emily. I know. I did it to see if you still remembered who I was. And I didn't, she said. We sat there in that silence again. But this time, it didn't feel like a weapon. It felt like mourning. Like standing in front of something beautiful that had already died. And realizing you were the one who buried it. After a few minutes, she asked. What happens next? I looked down at the coffee in my hands. That's up to you. After our conversation that morning, Emily disappeared into her room. She didn't say where she was going. Didn't tell me what she needed. She just went silent again. But this time, the silence felt different. Not avoidance. Not shame. Wreckage. The rest of the day passed like a dull ache. I stayed in my room, half reading a book, glancing out the window every few pages. Derek never came back into the kitchen. At one point, I heard the front door open and shut again. Fast. I didn't check who it was. I didn't need to. Let him run. Let him spin his own wheels in circles. Because for once, I wasn't going to chase peace in a house that kept moving it just out of reach. Sometime around 5 p.m., I heard her knock. 3 soft taps. Not rushed. Not forced. Just enough to let me know she was there. Come in, I said. Emily opened the door. Her eyes were red again. Her hair tied back like she used to wear it in high school. She looked younger somehow. Or maybe smaller. She walked in with a folded piece of paper in her hand. Sat down across from me, the same way she had when she was 12 and wanted to confess about breaking a neighbor's window. She placed the paper on the table between us. "I wrote something," she said. "Okay." I didn't plan to. But the words wouldn't stop. I waited. She unfolded the page. Her hands shook slightly as she began to read. "Dear Dad. I don't know when I stopped being your daughter. I don't mean biologically. I mean emotionally. I mean the version of me that used to call you every Sunday, that used to laugh at your corny jokes, that used to run to you when the world felt too heavy. Somewhere between marriage and money and pride. I let that version disappear. And I think I told myself it was okay because you were always there. Until you weren't. Not emotionally. Not completely. And now I realize, it wasn't because you stopped loving me. It's because I stopped being someone worth loving. I let Derek fill our home with coldness. I let him treat you like a burden. And worse. I let myself do the same. You gave up everything for us. Twice. You saved our home, not with noise, not with control, but with quiet sacrifice. And all I gave you in return was distance. I'm sorry, Dad. Not just for what I did. But for all the things I didn't do. For every time I stayed quiet when you were disrespected. For every night you ate dinner alone. For every cup of tea you made that I didn't say thank you for. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I hope you'll see this as my first step toward earning it. Love. Emily. Her voice cracked halfway through. She wiped her cheek with the back of her sleeve but never stopped reading. By the time she folded the paper again, the room was filled with a silence that wasn't cold, but heavy. A silence full of meaning. A silence that finally felt like presence, not absence. I didn't say anything for a while. I just looked at her. Not as a disappointment. Not as a stranger. But as a broken version of the little girl who used to hold my hand during thunderstorms. She waited for me to speak. I leaned back in my chair and took a breath. I don't need a letter, Emily. Her shoulders slumped slightly. Then I continued. I need change. She nodded, slowly. Then I'll change. Not for me. For me, she said. Because I miss the person I used to be. There it was. The first honest sentence in this house in weeks. Maybe months. Maybe longer. I want you to stay, I said. Her eyes widened. I do, I added. But I need you to know, staying here doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. I don't want to pretend anymore, she whispered. Then let's start with the truth. She sat there for a long time after that. Not talking. Not crying. Just breathing. As if for the first time, she was inhaling honesty. Around 6:30, Derek came back. The front door slammed harder than necessary. He walked past the kitchen without saying a word. Went straight to their bedroom. Emily looked at me. Then quietly stood. I need to talk to him, she said. You should. She hesitated. Then turned back. If I ask him to leave, would you be okay with that? I paused. Not because I didn't know my answer. But because I didn't want to take that choice from her. I'll support whatever brings peace back into this house. She nodded. Then disappeared down the hall. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then 45. I didn't hear yelling. Didn't hear anything at all. Which scared me more. Finally, at 7:30, Emily returned. Alone. She sat back down, eyes swollen again. He's gone, she said softly. Just like that? She nodded. He didn't fight it. Didn't even try. And you? I told him I don't want to live in a house where the quiet is colder than shouting. She looked at me. I want a home again, Dad. Not just a house. I reached out and placed my hand over hers. Then let's rebuild it. One truth at a time. The house didn't feel lighter when Derek left. It felt emptier. Not in the comforting sense. In the kind that follows after an argument ends, but your hands are still shaking and the silence tastes bitter in your mouth. Emily and I didn't talk much that night. Not because we were avoiding each other, but because there was nothing left to say that could be said with words. The air was thick with what had already been spoken. And the rest? The rest had to be shown. The next morning, I made breakfast. Just for the two of us. Scrambled eggs. Toast. No cinnamon rolls. Emily joined me in the kitchen around 7:15. She looked tired, but her steps were different now. Slower, yes, but also grounded. Like she was finally feeling the floor beneath her again. "Smells good," she said softly. "It's just eggs." Still, she smiled faintly, better than coffee and guilt. That line hung between us. Honest. Raw. But not sharp. I placed a plate in front of her. We ate quietly. Not awkwardly, but gently. Like two people learning to share space again. After breakfast, she started cleaning. Not the way she used to, rushing through it, frustrated. This time, she moved like she was trying to make peace with every object in the room. She wiped down cabinets. Straightened the cushions. Picked up a sweater from the floor and folded it properly. She didn't do it for show. She did it for herself. And I watched her without interrupting, because sometimes, letting someone rebuild in silence is more respectful than filling that silence with advice. Later that day, she knocked on my door again. "Can we talk?" I nodded. She entered holding an old photo album, thick and dusty, with the edges of old pictures sticking out like wrinkled paper wings. She sat down beside me and placed the album between us. "I found this in the attic. I forgot I even kept it." I opened it slowly. Page after page, memories. Emily as a child. Her first bike. Her birthday cake with lopsided candles. Her mother's smile. My arm around both of them. For a while, we didn't say a word. We just turned pages. Together. Halfway through, she paused. Pulled out a single photo tucked inside the back cover. It was torn at the edge. Faded slightly. It was of the old house we used to live in, before she got married. The one her mother and I built from scratch. "I used to think that was the safest place on earth," she whispered. "It was," I said. "Until I left." "You didn't leave," I corrected gently. "You grew." "No," she said, voice trembling. "I ran. I ran into a life I wasn't ready for. And then when it started falling apart, I let you become the backup plan." She looked at me, eyes glossy but steady. "I stopped seeing you as a father. I started seeing you as a fallback. And yet, I never stopped being your dad." Her breath caught. She didn't cry this time. She simply leaned forward and rested her head on my shoulder. We stayed like that for minutes. Still. Quiet. Together. The next few days passed slowly. Derek didn't come back. Not to collect things. Not to fight. Not even to say goodbye. Emily boxed up his clothes and left them by the front door. No note. No message. Just closure. There was no drama. No yelling. Just soft resolve. One evening, we sat outside on the back porch. The same porch where I'd once sat alone after revealing the truth. Now, we were both there. Tea in hand. Blankets over our legs. Emily stared out at the yard. "I don't know what happens next," she said. "You don't need to. But everything feels so unfamiliar now. That's what rebuilding feels like." She nodded. "I keep thinking about what respect really means." "What have you come up with?" She took a deep breath. "That it's not about words. Or titles. Or who pays the bills. Go on. It's about what you do when someone gives you their trust, and how you protect that trust. I smiled. Then you've learned more in a week than most people do in a lifetime. She turned to me. Do you think Mom would have forgiven me? That question hit me like a brick. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I could still see her, my wife, sitting in that same spot 10 years ago, laughing at something Emily had said. Yes, I said finally. She would have. Even after all this? Especially after all this. That night, I heard music coming from the kitchen. Soft. Instrumental. The sound of pots and pans. Laughter. Not loud. But light. And I realized, the house didn't feel empty anymore. Not because it was full of noise, but because it was finally full of presence. Emily came to my room later. Handed me a piece of paper. What's this? The new Wi-Fi password, she smiled. I laughed. You changed it? I changed a lot of things. Then she hesitated. One more thing, Dad. Yes? Tomorrow. I'd like to invite a friend over. Which friend? You. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I let out a real laugh. Not forced. Not polite. Just honest. And in that laugh, something old returned. Not just between us, but inside her. A daughter. A home. And a father who never stopped waiting. The house still made the same noises. The creak in the hallway floorboards. The groan of the pipes when the water heater kicked in. The soft hum of the fridge in the early morning hours. But something had changed. The sounds no longer felt hollow. They felt human. Like the house was breathing again. It had been a week since Derek left. He hadn't called. Hadn't sent a message. Not even to retrieve his belongings. The box of his clothes still sat untouched by the door. Emily hadn't asked about it. And I hadn't either. Some silences don't need to be filled. Some doors don't need to be reopened. That morning, I walked into the living room and paused. It was clean. The throw pillows were arranged. The TV was off. And in the center of the room, where that Sunday lunch had once turned to ash, sat a tray. On it was a white teacup. With a thin blue rim. Emily's favorite. Next to it, a second cup. Mine. Steam rose slowly from both. I heard footsteps and turned. She stood in the kitchen doorway, holding a small plate of pastries. Her hair was brushed. She wore her mother's old cardigan. There was no makeup, no performance, just softness. I didn't know if you'd be up yet, she said gently. I'm always up early. Old habits. Hard to break. She placed the plate on the tray and sat beside me. We didn't speak for a moment. We just existed. Together. Then she turned to me. I found something yesterday. What was it? A voicemail. From Mom. Saved on an old phone. She pulled out a worn-out cell, pressed play. A voice, delicate, warm, filled the air. Hi, sweetheart. Just calling to say I love you. And to remind you, if life ever gets loud or messy or heavy, remember that your dad, he's your compass. He always points you home. The message ended. Emily didn't look at me right away. I didn't look at her. Our eyes stayed forward, fixed on the steam curling from our tea. But our breathing synced. And that was enough. Later that day, we opened the windows. Let the breeze move through the house. The curtains danced. The sunlight painted the floors. And in that moment, the house no longer felt like it belonged to anyone. It felt shared. Not bought. Not claimed. Just lived in. The way homes are supposed to be. At lunch, Emily cooked. Nothing elaborate. Just grilled cheese and tomato soup. But she made mine with extra cheese, the way I liked it. The way she remembered I liked it. And when she served it, she placed her hand on my shoulder and said, "Thank you, for not giving up on me." I looked at her. For the first time in a long time, I saw her as both who she was and who she used to be, a woman grown from a girl who had once believed her father could fix anything. And maybe, just maybe, he still could. That evening, she went to the porch and sat alone. I let her have that space. Watched from the kitchen as she rocked gently in the old chair. She wasn't crying. She was thinking. Grieving. Not just for the marriage that ended, but for the version of herself she'd outgrown. I joined her as the sun dipped behind the trees. We sat side by side. And finally, she asked, "Dad, will you ever forgive me?" I turned to her. "Emily, I never stopped loving you. And sometimes, love means holding hurt in silence until someone is ready to see it." Her breath caught. Tears welled, but she didn't look away. "Then I see it now. All of it." The porch light flickered on as the sky deepened to blue. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. The air smelled like soil and rain. Emily took a deep breath and said, "You know what I regret the most?" "What?" "That I let a house become more important than the man who made it a home." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because she finally understood. Later that night, as I stood in the hallway turning off the lights, I paused outside the room where Derek used to sleep. It was quiet now. Still. No arguing. No footsteps. No tension in the walls. I turned off the hallway light and whispered, "This house doesn't need volume anymore." And with that, I went to bed. In the days that followed, Emily applied for a job. Part-time at a local bookstore. She didn't ask me for help. Didn't ask for advice. She just handed me the application receipt one morning and said, "I want to earn my way back into this place. Not the house. Our home. The room that once held no laughter now held morning tea. Fresh air. Open doors. Slow music. And the kind of quiet that feels earned, not feared." Because in the end, this story wasn't about a house. It wasn't about signatures or deeds or who paid what. It was about respect. And what happens when it disappears. And how, sometimes, the only way to rebuild what's lost, is to sit quietly in the ruins with the people who helped tear it down. And wait. Until they finally reach for a broom. And begin.